Welcome to the Massive Change Show. I'm Justin Foster.
And I'm Dr. Virginia Lacayo. In each episode, we have conversation with leaders who are getting in some good trouble by challenging paradigms and shaking the system.
And after each conversation, the episode shifts to the second show, where Virginia and I chat about what we learned from the guest.
If you know of any leaders who will make a great guest, please introduce us.
And of course, if you enjoy the show, please like, share, and leave a review.
Thanks for listening.
Welcome, Jane Evans, to the Massive Change Show. I knew within 10 seconds, honestly, when I first talked to you, when I reached out to you about being on the show, that A, Virginia and I had found another spiritual kindred spirit, and B, you are relentlessly interesting. So I've been looking forward to this conversation, and I know Virginia has as well. So welcome to our little corner of agitation and activism.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I like to be in these are the corners I like to be in.
That's great. That's beautiful. Well, we just have you start with a little bit of your backstory. Give us a 2-minute version of how Jane Evans ended up doing what she's doing right now.
Okay, so I started my career in 1982 as an advertising creative. Became one of the most successful female creators of my generation. At 35, hit the glass ceiling, set up my own agency, and it was fantastic. But when I hit 50, I came back to England and actually had my maternity leave because I'd run my own business for so long that I hadn't actually ever taken any time off for my kids. And then in 2015, I think it was, a thing came out saying that only 3% of the world's creative directors were female, which may not, it's a dreadful figure, but the frightening thing about it is creative directors are the people that decide what you get to see. So only 3% of the ads were approved by women or, thought that this is what women want. So I very, very, very loudly stuck my hand up and was completely and utterly ignored by my industry, even though I was the most ridiculously overqualified woman for the role. And I would get ages into my face. I actually had one creative director going, Jane, I give you a job, but you'd end up as the old woman doing the shit nobody else wants. So I was absolutely amazed by this. So for the first time in my life, I didn't have a client and I didn't have a brief. So I went, I'm going to make midlife women my client. I'm going to make midlife women my brief, because I figured if I could become invisible, what hope did anybody have? So I started campaigning. I set up a thing called the Uninvisibility Project, and I thought it was going to be a sort of Humans of New York type thing where I'd find an amazing midlife woman, take a photograph, write her story. Launched it on International Women's Day. It got 2 million hits on a hashtag, really took off. Then the emails started arriving. I used to be a PR whiz. I'm now driving a bus. I was one of the world's first VJs. I'm now applying for jobs as a hotel maid. I was a VR director for the BBC. I'm now wiping the ass of an Alzheimer's patient. And it just became absolutely obvious. And my experience as well, if one more person had told me to go and work at fucking Sainsbury's, I was going to slap them. There's this expectation that once you hit a certain role, you either took a caring role or a minimum wage role. The idea that you could go and get a corporate job was unheard of. So during lockdown, Carol Russell and I wrote our book, Invisible to Invaluable, Unleashing the Power of Midlife Women. And off the back of that, we started a training program called Visible Start, which trained midlife women to get jobs in advertising. So I went from, I was bankrupt and about to be evicted, and then, sort of went to the point that, set up a very successful business. However, at the end of November in 2024, I was like, we're not going to have a business anymore because DEI is dead. And, sort of within 2 months of that, almost every woman that we'd got employed in the program had lost their job. And what I did was on LinkedIn, I had a massive following. Oh, not a massive following in LinkedIn. I think I had like 16,000 at the time. And I would put up videos and get 500,000 views. So I put up posts, they would get everywhere. And so I just put up one of my normal midlife women posts, a black and white photo of a, miserable looking midlife woman, and, oh, we have it tough, blah, 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 blah. But then if you pressed more, it went, okay, the world's on fire. Us battle axes need to organize. And 250 women answered that call. 125 women turned up on the actual phone call. I had no idea why I was calling these two women together. I had nothing in place, but it was just a feeling that, damn, we've got to do something. So off that, I sort of took all of this feedback of women going, yes, we've got to get together, we've got to do something, but what? What do we do? How can we do it? Sort of what are we going to do? So I went away and came up with the seventh tribe. And the seventh tribe is named after the tribe of Dinah, which is the seventh child of Jacob. And so there are 13 tribes of Israel, not 12. And so it's for anybody that didn't get their inheritance, anybody that was left out. So not just women, but it's sort of a real, sort of, it's almost like that was the first place where women were really written out of history. And I set up a site where we could basically come together. It had a feed, made loads and loads of mistakes in the first year, pivoted, turned all on zero money. Also what had happened was like 3 days after deciding to do it, my partner in crime, Ruby Blessing, who we've built websites together since there were websites, got sepsis and became a quadriplegic. And so throughout the year, we had all of this tragedy happening. Anyway, as things would happen, we then got to this year and a little bit of angel investment came in so we could take all the mistakes and put them all right and rebuild the website, because Ruby had taught herself to control her computer with facial expressions. And so we started working together. You'd never know that there was any difference. We're so used to working with each other that it was just an absolute dream. So I got the new website up and running and ready. And lo and behold, the Epstein files came out, and that same level of anger was everywhere. You may have heard that, sort of for the last year, we've also been fighting the algorithm, because when I went to launch the company, my 16,000 followers, my videos and anything that I put up was getting to 30 to 50, maybe 150 people if I was lucky. And I saw Cindy Gallup was having the same problem. And, I was like, I'm don't know what to do with this. And then one day on Facebook, one of Cindy's friends was like, hold on a minute, I've just had an ad, a post, banned because it said Sex Goddess Cindy 65. And I went, hold on a minute, Cindy was 65 in February. What's going on here? And, and at the same time, I'd been making goddesses on Midjourney for ages. And all of a sudden they turned into sex goddesses. They'd gone from being deities into having their boobs out, their legs out. And, and I went, hold on a minute, the algorithms changed. And all of a sudden goddess has been put next to sex goddess. So that's why, so we started looking at why this drop was happening. We could sort of explain it from Cindy because she runs Make Love Not Porn. So you can see how a machine would be going to suppress her, even though she's got 140,000 followers. And I was using the word goddess. So, I was being, but so we started looking at it and experimenting on what would happen. And then a guy came in and said, can we do something together? So we then put 4 people, put the same post up at exactly the same time. And what I did was take all the words that Trump had banned in the NSA and wrote this post with every single banned word in it. And Cindy reached 0.6% of her audience. I reached 8% of my audience. And Matt Lawton reached 143% of his audience. So, it was apparent that there was something very wrong. We kept on looking at it. We then had identified a thing called proxy bias, which was they weren't actually going male, female, or these words. It was actually a combination of a lot of different systemic biases built into the code that were just making these figures come up. So, and then I think Megan Corniche found a setting where you could change your setting to male without changing anything
Mm-hmm.
else. And all of a sudden her figure's like she got 400% extra reach. So what was a disaster for my company, like launching, like, it almost finished as just, sort of not being able to get to anybody. I went, well, hold on a minute. This is the perfect example of what we do. We spot a pattern early, much earlier than we were spotting this in May. We start to work out what is going on with the patterns. We get, some enough empirical evidence out there to say there is a problem here, and then take it out there. We started a petition. We got it into major newspapers all around the world, and really, caused a stink. But what I find really interesting is last week I went to an event with LinkedIn, and we weren't allowed to talk about the algorithm. It was like banned. But I found a way of talking about it throttling new business, which it is. It's, if women have micro businesses and, take away gender, anything like that, the financial costs are enormous for us. Anyway, after, having a spicy question of the thing, all of a sudden, my things lifted up. So when the Epstein files were released and I could sense that the anger was coming up again, it was like, well, let's launch again. Let's call a meeting let's start right from the very beginning of going, let's call a meeting of the matriarchs. Let's all work out what's going on and what we can do, because now we've got the platform where we can all meet away from the algorithm, where we can go and organize and, put on events where we can all come together. And, from my perspective, what I see is that we're creating an overarching narrative that everybody can follow, and then take direct action in the areas where they can take the action. So we're not here to do the action. We're here to inspire the action, to bring all the women together to be able to do the things that need to be done. Because as you can see, there's so much that needs to be done and changed in the world at the moment.
Wow.
Yeah. That is a fascinating story.
Virginia, that's what I got to hear a little bit of that when Jane and I first spoke, but I was like, wow. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I love how revolutionary it is. I mean, how, like, let's not improve things. Let's fuck things up.
But not in a, one of the things that I say is that you can't smash the patriarchy. You can't even dismantle the patriarchy. You almost have to love it to death. And that anything that you do that is confrontational is actually being patriarchal. However, it's been interesting. I've been having some guy having this whole like massive spiel on the thread, because, matriarchy is the opposite of patriarchy. And men are absolutely terrified that if we get in charge, that we're going to do to them what they've done to us for the last 4,000 years. And frankly, if that's what you think, I would be fucking terrified, because I'm just putting a list together of, the history, and, it's appalling. Right. And the thing is,
yes,
the majority of women in this world believe that the basic operating system of humanity is men and women loving each other. And so, the opposite of we're not like going, well, we've got to get rid of the patriarchy and we're going to replace it with the matriarchy. That's ridiculous. We should be doing what we were doing right from, before 4,000 years ago, which was having an egalitarian society where, your gender doesn't matter. But, the scales need to do this. So, yes, we need to get more vocal. Yes, we need to be sneakier and, sort of find ways to agitate. But, we're still weaker than them. They can still overpower us, but they can't overpower us here. So this is the time for the matriarchs. And when I say a matriarch, I don't mean a mother or a grandmother. I mean the most senior woman in a room. And for the first time in history, we have women in rooms that our ancestors would have dreamed of. And so it's like, if those women in those rooms start to take their position of power, and if we can build a matriarchy that is as strong as the patriarchy, then we get into the detail of how it is. But first, we've got to get this strong matriarchy happening.
I agree. And I think there is a confusion about, as you mentioned, that matriarchy is just the other coin, the other side of the coin of the patriarchy, and it's a completely different paradigm. I mean, when we think about the matriarchal cultures in other places and in history, was not the opposite of patriarchy in the sense of, just turning the coin and doing the same thing but to other people. Is the exact opposite. Is the care for nature, for instance, and to the connection, that everything is connected, that we're all connected, and that we have to take care of everything because everything is affected and is being affected by everything else. So we need to pay attention to the whole picture and the whole system. And it's more of a systemic view of the world and life and relationships, and that what really matters is the quality of the interactions more than the quality of the individual. So there is a lot of things, and the protection and the vision, the future vision of life is not just about the now, it's about what's coming and how we protect that. And that is really the fundamentals of a matriarchal approach to governance and life. And that is not flipping the coin of patriarchy. It's a completely different thing.
But the great thing is that it does kick up those emotions. And one of the things that I said to this guy was, can you give me one example of a matriarchy that has had power in the last 4,000 years? Can you name one matriarchy that has actually caused anything that is going on at the moment? And he didn't respond. He, kept on twisting my words. But my reaction is, like, everybody's got this definition of matriarchy, but there's never been an example of it. So we can make it whatever the hell we want. We can call it whatever we want. And unfortunately, what we're seeing at the moment is a massive reaction to Me Too. The Epstein thing today, there were articles today about, how there are emails about him, pushing how everybody needs to push back on Me Too. And the problem is that Me Too and Sheryl Sandberg's lean in feminism has disempowered feminism. It's disempowered feminism of the word, because it's no longer seen as a movement. It's now been rebranded as I'm a feminist. Now, certainly when I started in the industry, no, we followed feminism, but we didn't call ourselves a feminist. It was like, no, we follow feminism values. And so, but the thing is a matriarchy is, when you call yourself a matriarch, and you could be a matriarch at school if you're the head girl, or you're a matriarch. If you're the most senior woman in your business, you're the matriarch, because it's an attitude. It's an attitude of, we're looking after everybody. One of the things that I always love is there's only like two creatures that go through menopause, and that they're whales. Orca and pilot whales go through menopause, and female humans. Now, we're just getting to the point where our lifespan is similar to whales. It hasn't been. It now is a similar lifespan. In the whale culture, it's the matriarchs that lead the pods. And the reason why the matriarchs lead the pods is because they care about everybody. And if we as the matriarchs come together, so in the States and in Europe, it's exactly the same figures. If a woman over the age of 50, and we've put it at that at the moment, has a partner and two children, she has direct loving influence over 120% of the population. Now, if we could get rid of left and white and black and white and this and that and all the little arguments that are put in place to set us apart, and actually come together as women and go, all right, this is what's really hugely important to us as women. Women first. Doesn't matter about your politics, doesn't matter about this. I'm sure all of us agree that protecting our children is the most important thing that human beings can do. And that that should be put as a level of importance that protecting our children is the same. And, and we also have to get to the point where we can have empathy for other women without any of the divisions. So a Jewish woman should be able to project herself and imagine what it would be like protecting her family in a tent in Gaza. And the mother in Gaza must be able to empathize and recognize what it must have been like for a Jewish woman in the kibbutz on October the 7th. Now, of course, there's always going to be ups and downs in different parts of the argument. But if we can start at that very, very, very base point of all of us love our children equally. None of us love our children less than others. We all have the same hopes for them. And we're currently in a world where the world is getting worse for them. The world is 10 times worse for my 24-year-old daughter. I mean, I look at myself at 24. I already owned a house. I had a career. I had no debt because my college was free. It was like, and I look at my 24-year-old daughter who, getting a job is almost impossible. I mean, fortunately, she's really talented, so she's doing freelance and things like that. But she wanted a job. She wanted a career, but it's just impossible. I've watched her for the last 2 years trying, and it's just been like, and I'm like, she went to the top college. It was like, one of the hardest photography courses in the world to get into, and she can't get an intern job. So, it was like, and on the other end of the scale, as I said, we've got all of these mothers that are losing their jobs, and there's no benefits for mothers with grown-up children. So what they're finding is like they can't downsize, they can't get any benefits. And, even if the kids do get a job, they're not going to earn enough money to keep 2 or 3 people in a house. So, we are, again, the sort of almost like the canaries in the coal mine is that we can see the effects of what is coming and feel it. And it's, this is one of the things that's been lost over, thousands of years is a respect for women's intuition. We do feel something. There's something in us that is primal in us that we sense danger. So, when we can feel that something's off, we might not be able to name it, but let's start exploring those feelings, which is basically how the Seventh Tribe started. And now it's sort of got to the point now where we're ready to organize now. We've got the story, we've got the narrative right, we've got the website working, and we seem to have got the algorithm working for us again. So, it's time for women to come together and find really clever, funny, non-violent ways of making real change.
Yeah. Well, as what I call a SWAM, straight white American man, which is a power center, probably the single largest still power center in the world, especially also, I sometimes say I follow Jesus, but so I can't be a Christian, in the empire sense. And so, yeah, that though too is my view that, and I'm curious for both of you to please answer this because it's on my mind a lot, is I feel called to go Scorpio on white men who are apathetic about all this. And, it's like, and I don't have a desire to be, I don't need to understand them psychologically about where they're coming from and what wounds they had and everything. Fuck all that. They've had access to therapy. They got access to all kinds of things and they're still fucking apathetic. And so that's where I go scorched earth on some of these dudes. And I get some pushback like, well, they need to be compassionate with them. But I don't want to. I want to sort of beat the patriarchy with the patriarchy. Does that make sense? And am I off on doing that?
Look, I don't think we can tell anybody how to do anything. I think what we can do is sort of present new narratives. And so, I would be saying to these guys, and this is something I've been looking at. There's a wonderful man called Rutger Brennan. You might have seen him a couple of years ago. He always goes to the World Economic Forum and really grills the billionaires. Like he's just like grills them. He's a historian. His move at the moment is, why aren't you leaving a legacy of good? That's what the Rockefellers and the people behind, used to do. Like, you're all just, storing all of this for yourself. It was like, why are you being so greedy? And so, I think there are ways of being able to love the patriarchy to death as well as spike them. I think men, you have a much better ability to Scorpio them than we do. I always say, I love this. So medical experiments were not done on women until 1993, which I find amazing because I was like 31 at the time. I just blows my mind that not how recent that was. So in the year 2000, a group of scientists at the UCLA did an experiment on the fight or flight reflex, of which was what was our reaction to stress. And they used female examples and female mice. And they came up with a third reaction to stress, which was tend and befriend. Now that makes absolute sense. If the men are all off hunting and a pack of wolves come to the gate, what do? You feed them. That's why we have domesticated dogs now, is because of tend and befriend. So, what I'm saying to women is, you can be, it's like, don't fight them. Either go around them, laugh at them, because, women are afraid that men will kill them, but men are afraid that women will laugh at them. Or actually hold out a hand and say, hold on a minute, billionaire or rich man or, absolute horror in the office. Have you decided what your legacy is going to be? What are you going to be remembered for when you leave this place? It was like, are you going to be remembered for anything? Why aren't you using this? Why aren't you using your power and your resources, particularly in finance? If
Yes.
I'd been given tech bro level money, oh my God, I'd have every
Right.
woman in the world on here by now,
Right.
So, yeah.
Yes.
I think I have a third way of seeing this. I think that I agree. Women by nature, we are more conciliatory. Like, we try to let's build consensus. Let's find the middle ground. Let's meet at the middle. But that doesn't work all the time. I mean, the problem is that we have a very strong ego as humans, and men have developed that ego way more strongly, and partly by nature, partly by culture, right? But the thing is that when the ego is set on something that is about protecting the identity, protecting the greed, protecting the desires, whatever, the ego is blind and deaf, meaning that any conversation just in that way, like trying to talk sense into them, will not work. Just because there is this capacity of listening when is perceived as dichotomous. So I think that there is a combination of things. For on one hand is, yes, let's model a different way of leading and conflict resolution. That's what we do best, and we kept doing that. So is taming the conflict that patriarchy are building by doing it the way we do it, like finding common grounds, putting people together, and encourage diversity, because that's what creates innovation and new ways of thinking, and that not avoiding the conflict, but not creating the conflict, but not avoiding them. Is like, let's talk about the difference. Let's build it together. That's one way. And maybe for some men, some arguments might work, might just like click somehow. But there is another sector, both in women that have been raised with patriarchal values, and they've been believe that that's the right way, but mostly for men, that we need a radical shift in the paradigm they have about life. It's like really changing their glasses. And that's something that doesn't happen through speech, doesn't happen through just giving information. We know that information doesn't change behavior. Emotions change behavior. Changing their emotions change their behavior. So I think that the challenge is to create conditions, and any systems change when the conditions that they operate change to the point that they have no option but to adapt. That's nature. So it's about changing the conditions where patriarchal men especially operates in a way that they have no option but to change. And there are hopes. I mean, if you allow me, Justin, to share a personal
Of course.
story.
Yeah, go.
Justin, I mean, he has shared the values of fairness and in many ways feminist values his whole life. But he was the patriarchal of his family, and he was raised in a in a religious setting and in a cultural setting that the patriarchal was a clear role to play. And when we met, I saw some of those traits. And I remember a moment that was very hopeful for me. I mean, that was like change is actually possible and in a most beautiful way. Obviously, he's a way advanced man and his level of consciousness is beyond any other man I know. But still, there are reminiscences, like some part of the culture and the raising that are with you until they're not. And I was very early in our relationship, I needed to go to a board meeting. I'm the president of one of the largest uh, women's funds in Latin America, and it's a very impactful one. And we're doing an amazing job in Latin America, which has talking about patriarchy, horrible circumstances. And we were debating about that in Latin America, women are not fighting for rights to better wages or to, even jobs, that we're fighting for the right to live, to stay alive, to be alive. And so we were discussing that, and I have to be absent very early in our relationship. I have to be absent for about a week to go lead this organization and lead the board meeting. And Justin means that Justin has to stay with my son, with my biological son, our youngest son, for the first time. And he sent me a message, and he talked to me one of those nights and said, like, it just hit me. I mean, this changing the conditions. He said, it just hit me that maybe my role is not to be in the spotlight, be the leader, be the one bringing the change. Maybe my role is to support the wise woman that is actually doing something, that is the activist and is changing the world for real, instead of trying to get the spotlight on me. And so it's really, you are doing a job that is way more impactful than whatever I could be doing if you stay home, because I have something to say. And that was, I think, was more of a revelation for him than for me. But for me was like the change in the conditions create an emotion of having to revise his identity, his being left behind, let's say, staying at home, taking care of the domestic aspect of our life, so I could lead an organization that's making a difference. And understanding the importance of his role in that moment for his ego, make a switch and say, like, well, this is not less important because somebody has to do it. And it's about which one of us can make a bigger contribution in this specific moment. Obviously, now we moved to Mexico, and I'm doing a lot of the things, I'm doing a lot of it, but mostly because of cultural and language and stuff. But that is, for me, was, if we create conditions where men are forced, because nobody changed by voluntarily. I mean, the brain resists change. Systems resist change, no matter what. They tend to stability, to what is known, to the familiar, what is comfort. And this is a very comfortable system for most men. But if we are capable of switching shifting the conditions in a big enough way to make them stop and say, like, wait a second, this is not what I know. I need to adapt. And from that perspective, saying like, maybe this is a good point for me to reconsider what is my legacy, what is my role, where I play a better contribution, where can I contribute the best to the things that I believe. And I agree with you, deep down, most of us, maybe not all of us, because, we're humans.
We
but
can never
most of
say
us,
all of us.
most of us really want the best for the world and for their children and for our children and the next generation. I mean, nobody once said like, well, nobody. Most people will not say like, oh, my purpose in life is to destroy the planet and to, like accelerate climate change and to, like most of us, again, there are some people, but if we can just help them redirect the ego and say like, how can my ego be still protected and protect myself as is its role, but from a place and from a role that is more productive for humanity in general. So it's, yes, we need to fight a little, but
no, I'm not saying we don't need to fight the system, because
but fight the system.
It's the system.
Yes.
I find it really interesting as well. And most of the women that I know, it sort of almost branches what both of you say. Most of the women that I know that are, are in relationships have done that work with their husbands. It's very, sort of women that are in positions, big businesses or whatever, have usually sort of done that, done the job that you've done. And that's what I'm sort of saying is that's where Justin's point comes in, is that's when you have to go and fight for it. It was like, that's when you have to go and speak up for us. And one of the things I want to do is rev women up, but also give them a narrative that they can give. So, when I say to people, do you actually know what patriarchy is or when it started? Because certainly men believe that the world has always been patriarchal. It's like it's ingrained in them. It's like the world started with the Roman Empire. I know that there was that meme where sort of men think about the Roman Empire. Seriously, they really genuinely believe that the patriarchy has been here forever. Now, what I say to women is, when a man steals one of your ideas, you know how bad it feels? Like, it's not just an annoyance, it's something really primal, isn't it? It was like, because they stole everything from us. Civilization started when women invented brewing, because we could now make water potable. When we could make water potable, we then invented agriculture, so we didn't have to go around finding all of the crops. We could just start growing them. Off that came textiles and pottery. That became trade. Trade became cities. And then came the Bronze Age. And cities all of a sudden had weapons of mass destruction. And then with weapons of mass destruction came empire. Now, the problem with empire was that anybody could get an army together and go and take over a town or a city, but keeping it was almost impossible until Hammurabi in 1792 BCE. So we've got an exact date that the patriarchy started. Put up a stele in the middle of the towns, of the city squares, with, I think, 322 laws, which made women the property of men. I mean, invented a caste system of slavery and brought in an eye for an eye, so this is the guy that made the whole world blind. Now, the reason why he was successful was because it wasn't Hammurabi and his troops taking over the cities. It was the sun god Shamash who had given him this instruction. And these laws did not come from Hammurabi. They came from the sun god Shamash. And basically that was the introduction of the patriarchy, which is 1.3% of human history. At the time, women built all trade. All trade and all technology was women's inventions, women's work. And as cities grew, then all of a sudden came in merchants, where men started to sell women's products, and they got demoted. And then along comes the king. You can't be in the army. You got to become property. They brought in rape laws. They name it. Then add another 1,000 years, and we have Josiah finds a scroll in the Temple of Solomon, and goddess worship is wiped out completely. So we went from 40,000 years of only being a goddess, only goddesses, and the gods only started arriving with the Bronze Age, and kings with divine power only came in in the Bronze Age. So the complete eradication took until the Iron Age, and it was almost as soon as the Iron Age came and those weapons of mass destruction meant it could get even bigger and better, was all of the goddesses were completely wiped out. So that's basically how it all happened. Now, when you actually know that as a human being and you go, hold on a minute, that is why we've almost built this whole world with just the masculine, and we've suppressed all of the feminine. And now here we are in 2026, and the majority of this women in this world are sad, angry, upset, can't bear it anymore. It's almost like all of our ancestral memories are sort of like resurfacing, and we are hurt. And, you know, this is a time where we've got to channel that anger, because, you know, they want us to explode. You know, they want to beat us up in the streets, really. So we've got to find, you know, really clever ways around it, because everything's propaganda and everything's built on a story. So we've got to build new stories, because, you know, facts don't count. But if you can counter a story with another story, it was like, I'm not saying that your story doesn't make sense, but what I'm saying is there is more than one story. And so the story you believe and the story I believe, we've got to find a way for those two to come together.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think in that case, having allies like Justin and men that really understand this is important, because men will listen to men better and faster and more than they will listen to women. So having Justin has the Scorpio in him, so it's a Viking, you know, like that kind of expression of his anger and disapproval and this emotion and disappointment. But I think we need men like him to actually agitate a little bit and challenge the thought of other men, because there is this understanding that women is like, you don't understand us, you don't know how it is.
It's really interesting you say Viking. I'm Viking too. Up until the start of the 20th century, any archaeological finds were just automatically presumed to be men. And now there's great embarrassment where all around the world, they are finding that group of Viking warriors were female. And that group of African warriors, they were female too. So, you know, it is ridiculous to think that all women in the world are the same. I think we have to have the attitude and recognize the tend and befriend. But no, fuck it. If you're a warrior, you know, go for it. Go for it with everything you've got. You know, like my heroine, and I still to this day, you know, miss her, was Sinead O'Connor. I mean, what a brave, brave, brave woman. You know, 10 years before the church admitted that there was child abuse, she went on Saturday Night Live and tore up a picture of the Pope. I mean, and then, you know, before she died, she was on Twitter live tweeting, plucking her chin. I was like, oh my God, I couldn't love you more.
Yeah. Well, we kind of covered the first system shaker question and all of that. We know what the big idea that's pissing off powerful people. It was very natural. And so I'm curious, and this is more almost like materially, as you think about, you know, for lack of a better term, monetizing this. It's completely ethical to monetize a movement as long as you do it ethically. What are some of the challenges that you're facing? You know, are you getting blowback from other women? Are you getting, almost from an entrepreneurial perspective? What are some of the challenges you're running into? Business challenges.
Besides the algorithm.
Besides the
thing
algorithm, yeah.
the algorithm was a major part.
Yes.
But now I just need to get enough to get word of mouth happening. As soon as word of mouth happens, I just need to get enough women on calls for them to go, the next call, we need to bring 3 women to it. So that's the easy part.
Yeah.
From I've done a lot of experimenting over the last year, and having worked with midlife women at the moment, is I know that we are either flat broke or doing very well and very little in between. And so everything that I do on the platform has a sister help sister. So for instance, the events that we've got tomorrow, we've got 3 events, one at 9 a.m. UK time, one at 4 p.m. UK time, and one at 10 p.m. UK time. And I just pay what you want. And, in my mind, I had an idea of what the ticket price would be. And seriously, every time I do this, I get what I would have charged if I was charging everybody. We've just put everything onto a subscription basis. There's regular Sister Help Sister, and then there's Patreon. It was like, do you actually want to be part of the running of it? Do you want to actually, be growing this? And so what I'm finding is very matriarchal, is to sort of say, we make everything, and we do a bursary. I had a woman this morning put in an bursary, why do you need the bursary? It was like, I'm homeless. It was like, bang, here you go. Here's 3 months. If you still need us in 3 months' time, come back and we'll give you another 3 months. So, we're finding that, the model is working. So the financial model, although it's sort of really tiny at the moment because of the algorithm, if we can get over that and, have a few hundred people like we've got coming to the meeting tomorrow. If those few hundred people bring 3 more people, each time it's going to grow exponentially, so that all of a sudden, we are actually making the sort of money. And, again, coming from a platform where I've trained women to get jobs, I know how much talent is underutilized out there. If I had a budget to staff this place, I'd be going, I'd already be going, I've got them all. I've worked with them. I know them all. These are the women that have got the skills to do this. So, and if we can encourage, for me, it's about bringing communities together. Like there's lots and lots of different communities out there, all with different meanings, but if the 7th tribe can be this sort of overarching place where you come for the narrative, and come for ideas. So for instance, I first visited Palestine in 1979, and it was very funny because my best friend at art school was Palestinian. And on the plane, on the way over, first of all, she had to teach me that all of those words that she taught me in Arabic were actually swear words and that I wasn't to say them under any. So she'd had this running joke of teaching me every swear word in Arabic. So it was like, these are the things that you cannot say, Jane, at all. And there was the list of things. And then you cannot say the word Palestine. It's illegal. You will get into so much trouble. Do not say the word Palestine. So we called it the Holy Land. So I'm saying to women, one really simple protest that all of you can do is never say the word Israel again. Always call it the Holy Land. That's not anti-Semitic. It's not, it's not confrontational. But if millions of women around the world decide that they're only ever going to call it the Holy Land, that's sending such a massive message of this is what I believe, which is this is for everybody. It's the Holy Land. It's God's land. It doesn't belong to people or kings that subjugate the teachings and turn them into empire, war, and control, which is, and I say to people, if you are religious, go and have a look at what came from God and the prophets and what came from kings. And if you take what came out from kings, like the Lord's Prayer, it was translated from Aramaic to Hebrew to Greek to such and such to English. When it's now translated purely from Aramaic to English, it doesn't say anything. There is no dear God, our Father. It is the source of all life. The only mention of anything like that is the word kingdom, which is the name for a country. It's not a king. And was about having a direct relationship with God, not an intermediary. So go find those things out.
And that's the thread. There's threads that you can start pulling I refer to it in the U.S. as white lies. So playing off of that, like there's things that and it's is this belief that if you lie about history, you lie about everything else. You know, because you can't. And so you take what I call empire Christianity, you know, like and go back and start pulling some threads on how heavily edited the Bible was. But there's one in particular, what you said with Aramaic, and you can do this with ChatGPT. You know, let's use the empire's tools against them, you know, in some ways. And like Meta glasses and shooting video of you know, abuse by federal agents, you know, things like that. Anyway, the word that Jesus used in Aramaic whenever he was translated later to father in Aramaic means father, mother, or non-binary. And boy, you want to get a white Christian evangelical all huffy, just tell them that. I do all the time. It's fun. So,
but the thing is, the more they hear those stories, the more that they hear it, not just your fringe Scorpio guy that's having a sting at him, you know, when he goes round to dinner with, you know, I mean, my dream is, you know, one of the things that I want to do is a social imagination project where we get all the matriarchs and we teach them about what all the amazing technology that's coming. Because the people that are developing it and the people in the industry are the only people that really know that. They don't come and tell us. Now, most of these things require major societal change for it to work for humanity rather than just the billionaires. So again, I want to run a program where we get all of these experts coming in going, this is what quantum computing is going to mean. This is what the future of AI is. You know, this is what's happening in geopolitics at the moment. This is what's, you know, and basically get us, you know, instead of, you know, flipping around or getting entertained by social media, is really learn what's going on and then discuss how society needs to change for that to work. So that when that evangelical Christian goes to the matriarch for Thanksgiving or, you know, Sunday lunch with mum, is all of a sudden mum standing there talking about quantum computing and what it means. You know, start talking about the billionaires' plans to create a new AI god that we're all going to worship, because that's what Peter Funky Thiel is talking about.
Yeah, so, that's right.
So, you know, actually have the matriarchs really, really, really knowledgeable about, okay, so AI is going to take, robotics is going to take over all the jobs. How are we going to raise our children? What are we going to do with our time? You know, how is this actually going to work? And even though we won't have the answers, again, if we build this network, it's like if we can build the narrative of this is the way that we believe the world should be, then the next part of that network is the people that can actually make that happen. So it's almost like building a storytelling network where we can tell a story that you can easily pass on to somebody else that can then, you know, and we just sort of like word of mouth is like how we talk to each other, because I think we're all we're starting to see the dangers of social media. There's so much greatness in it, but there's so much dangers in it. And what I'm seeing, and after COVID and everything like this, is very much of the need for in-person contact and things like that. So, you know, again, with the social media project, what I want to do is I don't want one woman on a call. I want her to have a kitchen table full of women on the call, almost like a Tupperware model party version. Where they get their kit beforehand, they get their video, they can come to the live event if they're in the right time zone. But, you know, sit around and share these ideas and talk and have ideas. But at the end of it, go, all right, at the end of each one, make an affirmation of something, a piece of action that you are going to take. Because it's so easy in this world to go, oh, I'm just doing something on social media. That's going to make all the difference. And, you know, the billionaires are laughing because it was like, cha-ching, thank you very much. It's not going to make any difference.
Yes. So, go ahead, Virginia. Yes.
Just follow up on that. I mean, you're known for being a visionary or futuristic or predicting some trends. And I think you started with saying like that what we need is to change the system. It's not to fight people, but change the whole system from the structure, from the way we interact with each other, because that's what is going to force the conditions to change and force people to adapt. And that's a good, I think it's a good way to start, is creating those communities where women are savvy about everything, and they can anticipate and actually in advance do something to shape the direction that the system is going to be taken. What else is needed to scale this? I mean, I'm dying to see if you have a vision of building these communities. And by the way, if you and the community managed to create this event that you were talking about, I'm the first one registering it. I think I educate myself a lot about a lot of things. It's never enough. I'll be the one. So just send me the invitation. I'm committing yourself.
June is when we're planning. So in May, I'm doing a speaking tour in Australia. And the reason why I'm doing it in Australia, A, is I'm quite well known there because I spent most of my career there. But also, the patriarchy's only been there for 200 years. It hasn't even touched the soil. It hasn't even, it's really on an energetic level. And I believe that women in Australia are spiritually ready for this, probably more than anywhere else in the world, and New Zealand as well. So I might be going over there too. But I want to go and actually have in-person meetings with the women in Australia, almost as the test case to sort of let this spread out. So we're planning the social imagination project for June. So at the moment, I'm getting all the guest speakers and everything, sort of lined up. And, and for us, the way I'm looking at it is, we've got an angel investor who's like, let's scale. And I'm going, well, let's use this example, right? We're starting from today. I've just put up this post. It's got to 13,000 people. I've got, this many 100 women coming to the call. Let's see how many we turn those into a subscription. Let's see how many we turn into, because I basically organized a 7-week course where we can go through 7 steps to this, which is very much a sort of workshop format. Let's see how many of those we sell. Then we've actually got some real figures that we can say, now what happens when we scale this? And it was like, so I'm hoping that this is going to be enough to give us enough figures for somebody to go, this is scalable. There is definitely money in this, which will then give us the money to invest in, bigger speakers for the social imagination project and making that better. And, if the social imagination project, if I say to everybody, bring 10 women or, as many women as you can round that table, all of a sudden the 100 women that I'm getting on a call is going to be 1,000 women that are on the call. And if we do make it, there doesn't even have to be on the call, that you can buy a kit as well. And, we make it Thursday night as girls' night and we get together and educate yourself something. So, it really is a case of, letting this grow organically, letting the women that are attracted to it, coming to it, let the allies that are aligned with it to come in and sort of go. And the way that I find the allies work really best is, so what can we do to help? So, it was the ones that sort of go, I'm going to go off and do this. It's like, no, that's your ego at work. The ones that can actually come in going, we can see that you're doing something really interesting. What is it that we can do? What is it that we can do to help? Is really, the most useful thing. Because again, I've started this as me. I'm a creative person. I'm a storyteller. I'm a narrative builder. I'm going to be the voice of this. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a business planner. I'm not, so, we need to sort of grow the team, grow it into something bigger, but allow it to attract the people that it needs to attract, and allow it to grow in the way that it does. Because the more money that comes into it, the bigger we can grow it, the more secure we can make it, and the more we can employ women, which will help. I sort of say any midlife woman that you employ at the moment is helping with the horrendous youth employment statistics, because they're the ones that are going to be looking after them. So, as far as I can see, so long as we get the take up, so long as our messaging is right, so long as we attract the right people who then go, this isn't going to work with 100 women on a call. There needs to be 1,000 women on a call, and Jane needs to be doing 5 calls a week, for us to all sort of get on this. And, I'm 63. I've got 0 pension savings. So, I'm determined that in my last 7 years of my career, I am going to earn enough money for me to be able to actually have some freaking time off and build something that will mean that it's a world that I want to take time off in. And, I sort of say to all the women at the moment, forget the PTA, forget any of those structures that are patriarchal at the moment. You've got to start working on chipping away at this system from the foundations, because otherwise our children are going to be sent to war. And none of us have brought our children up to be sent to war. None of us have brought our children up to be soldiers. So, this is the front line of World War III. And if you can't see that, then you're not going to be part of, you're part of the patriarchy, or you're part of the problem. But I think, women, again, make it really simple. Why are you doing this? Because I don't want to send my children off to fight in wars anymore. I don't want to watch children being mutilated on my phone every single day. I don't want to see old ladies at the front of protests. But again, that's who it is. The old white women, owls as they call them, old white ladies, are at the front of every single protest. Mm-hmm. They're at the front of the protests here, they're at the front of the protest in Australia at the moment, they're at the front in Minneapolis. They were at the front in Iran. There was one woman saying that there was an older woman. They were all going, let's get in front of you. And she's like, no, I've lived my life. Get back. If they're going to shoot anybody, shoot me. So, again, which role do you want to take? Which role can you take? Are you willing to get arrested for a week? Is that not going to make, I sort of look at it and go, well, I'd be a bit worried about what happens with the dog. But apart from that, yeah, I could do a week in prison. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, right.
It's like any organization is, you've got lots of different personalities, you've got lots of different people, but if you're all like fight, that's what the patriarchy wants. They'll come and beat us up. But if you've got others going, right, we're on the humor brigade. So, again, one of the ideas I have is I'd like a whole group of women outside every Israeli embassy going, I support ISIS, but with a picture of the goddess Isis. So, you can do things with, do things with humor. It was like, get the press, make things that the press will be and, I'm sure that, even if you got 50 women all with signs, the press would be like, hold on a minute, what's going on here? And,
exactly.
Exactly. Use the humor, use the women that are really logical, use the women that are legal, use the women that are community organizers, use women that are teachers, get them, the massive problem of misogyny. Again, one of the worst things I've heard in the last few weeks is the level of abuse that young girls are having in their first relationships. The coercive control that these girls are putting under is the largest group of any of them. And it was like, for all of us older women that have been through coercive control, I go, could I have coped with that at 16? No. And also at that age, you're probably not talking to your parents about what's going on. So, these horrible battles that are going on for our daughters, again, people like Cindy Gallop is doing a wonderful thing with her Make Love Not Porn Academy, which is teaching good sexual relationships. We should all be doing this. We should be having these conversations about what sex actually is, because it's not porn. And, again, it's not a rape culture. Patriarchy is rape culture. We need to get rid of rape culture. Number one.
Right. We could probably talk to you for hours and hours, Jane. And honestly,
we should actually.
We should, and you two should talk. And I'm going to keep offending white dudes. Thank you for being on. Again, it's one of those things where I know we could keep talking, but in the spirit of podcast formats, we're going to bid you adieu for now. And Virginia and I are going to have the second show, and we will be in touch, and you will know we're going to work together, and we're here to support you. So thank you so much.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for having me on board. It's been great.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jane. I love that just sort of unfolded so naturally. Like we didn't really ask the questions, but the answers were there, each one of them. And what a badass, what she's doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the spirit also. I love that. That's what true feminism is about, really,
Right.
is saying like we're celebrating the beauty, the joy of life, where everybody has the opportunity to pursue happiness and fulfillment and have the right conditions to, do what they want to do with their life and
Right.
be who they want to be and do it with joy. And so
Yeah.
I love that. I love that spirit. I love got the attention. It's true that many of the activists that we are seeing, maybe not lately. I mean, fortunately, Gen Zs are being more challenging, irreverent. I wanted to say,
Mm-hmm.
and doing things in a different way, which is really what we need, because even activism from the 60s and the 70s are patriarchal tools. I mean, is
Right.
that don't work anymore. I mean, many of the ways that we're protesting are just following that this is the way we protest in patriarchy. And it
Right.
hasn't worked
Exactly.
because
Right.
it's not changing anything. So we need to find different ways. And her invitation to use humor and to use originality is like, God,
Mm-hmm.
get the attention, because it's about changing the narratives. And it's true, when you
Yeah.
change the narratives, you change the way you interact with phenomena, and you
Mm-hmm.
change the way you interact with other people and with each other. And when we change the way we interact with each other, the system change. And so this is not the only way. We need also structural changes, not just individual changes and relational changes, but also structural changes. But starting by changing the way we interact with each other, by calling attention to some things, by saying like, did you know about this? Or
Mm-hmm.
these are some facts that you didn't learn or nobody taught
Mm-hmm.
you about history and about, how things really are and life, etc. For some people, it's enough to wake up and to was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I never saw it that way. And that moment, every time that an aha moment happen in a brain, their internal system change, and it changed
Mm-hmm.
everything after that. I mean, you're never going to be the same person you were seconds ago. So that matters,
Right.
and calling that
And
attention.
yeah, and I think part of it at a macro level too is we have to, and she alluded to this, we have to change the conversation, from left right to level of consciousness. It's not left right, it's level of consciousness.
Yeah.
And because there are solutions. So if you would take some of the left right language, there are solutions that would be considered in the day more conservative, more like entrepreneurial, let's say, that are great solutions for some of the problems in the world. And and there are also like purity culture, which is a term within evangelicalism, also applies to progressivism. That a certain person is not ideologically pure enough, and therefore they shouldn't be listened to because they're not, like in the US, they're not left enough or progressive enough or blue enough or whatever. All that shit does is perpetuate the systems that create the patriarchal type structures that are in place. So there's that. The other thing is, what I love about where Jane is at is there's a lot of people that we know in our circle that have that kind of fire and vision and mission and things like that. And she's got the tools of the trade as a marketer, and they're tools. So the same tools that can be used to mindfuck people can be used to wake them up. And this is what's so exciting. That's why I wanted you guys to meet too, because your background with communication for social change and looking at complexity science and the science of movements and things like that, it's like you're in some ways, and maybe this is a bit too much hyperbole, but you're kind of the missing piece to what she's trying to build. Because, you know, when she talks about word of mouth and getting from 10 to 100 and gathering at tables, that's the science of word of mouth, which is your field. And but her ability, like you said, to use humor, you know, and to understand the nuance of language and what I call brand poetry. That is those are the tools that will also change things, that'll create the change, in my view.
And one more thing that I absolutely love,
Mm-hmm.
this idea of the social imagination project. And what I love about this is that so far we have got leaders from the world, including the most progressive sectors, people that actually want to change, getting together, asking question. And from a complexity science perspective, this is the difference that make the difference, is what kind of questions are you asking? And the people that got together to solve the world problems, they're asking, how can we solve this problem? And that means that you're still thinking within the box of your definition of the problem and your definition of the possible solutions and what is possible, what is available. When you talk about social imagination, you're not talking about how we solve the problem. We talk about, let's start from the beginning. Let's reimagine everything. Let's think about the most absurd ways. I mean, every idea is welcome because we don't know what is possible until we try it. And we don't,
Right.
and so it's really when people that think, yeah, we have to get together to think out of the box, the moment that you define the box, you're still within the box, thinking within
Mm-hmm.
that box. You just make it a little bigger. So it's about changing the questions. And I love this
Yeah.
idea of gathering people, not because of their position in governments, not because of their position in nonprofit or multilateral, just because they love the idea that women that have, especially in perimenopause, postmenopause, that we are
Mm-hmm.
done with all the reproductive roles and everything, that we can focus all of our energy and experience and intuition and wisdom accumulated into, now let's take care of the world, because
Yes.
let's put all this wisdom into outside, right? And to gather them to say, like, what will be ideal, not even think about what is possible, what is probable, what are the tools that we have, what is like the constraint. No, it's like, let's start with the ideal and then figure it out how
Yes.
we get there. Love it.
Yes. Right.
Love it.
You got to start with
Absolutely. I
you
hope.
got to yeah. To design the future, you got to imagine the future, and to imagine the future, you need to have to put it in spiritual or energetic terms, like your sacral energy needs to be awakened, or it perpetuates itself. And what she said about, like, the women, older women, owls, I think that's
Yeah.
what she used, the acronym.
White owl.
Standing in front of the crowd, and even in Iran, and standing in front, and it almost teared me up, because it goes to something I've been asking in brand strategy sessions for years, a question, which is, because the kind of branding that I teach is around, like, intrinsic values is kind of the starting point. And one of the questions is, what is something you'd be willing to commit civil disobedience to defend? And the more privileged and comforted you are, the harder it is to answer that question.
Yeah.
And and how she was just like, a week in jail, I worry about the dog, like, that's amazing. And the other thing too is this conditioning in the US in particular about the law. And there's this great, very dark, but very accurate, of these two guys in a red hats, MAGA hats, looking at Jesus hanging on the cross and saying he should have followed the law. You know, like everybody that changes shit breaks the law, like in the sense of whatever the law is. You know, it's Rosa Parks broke the law. Martin Luther King Jr. broke the law. Gandhi broke the law. Like this idea, you've got to decondition yourself that goes back to our whole, why we adopted John Lewis's, you know, and amplified John Lewis's quote about getting in good trouble. You gotta have the courage to get in good trouble. And you and I talk about this a lot when we're working with clients. There's two things we can't transfer to them. We can't transfer vision and we can't transfer courage. You know, so what Jane has is vision and courage. What you have is vision and courage. A lot of the activists that you support, especially through FCOM, you know, have vision and courage. What they need are resources. If you have vision and courage, you need resources and you know, and skills, right? Exactly. You need resources and skills. The last thing I have is just how symbiotic or natural it fit into our three activations. You know, you and I talked about, like, you need to activate three things in your organization or self: your leadership, the way you lead, what you call indomable and systemic leadership, the way you brand yourself, and the way that you activate your community, which is that combination of word of mouth and, you know, communication for social change. How Jane described her movement and the things that she wants to do, those things have already been activated in her as far as what they need to be. And now she's in execution mode. Did you notice that? Like, it wasn't a discussion of like, well, I don't know where this is going to go, and we'll see how big it's going to get. And no, she fucking knew, because those things had already been activated in her. That's just, they give me the tingles. So
Yeah,
awesome.
It was very, very inspiring, very energizing also.
Yeah.
Love it.
Exactly. All right, y'all. You know what to do. Introduce us to more people like Jane. And by the time this comes out, you will see a couple of initiatives from us that we'll link to in the show notes. But one is called Bootstrapping Justice. It's a 4-week or 4-module course, live coaching, designed and facilitated by Dr. Virginia Lacayo on what it takes to become an entrepreneurial activist. And I will be teaching one of the modules on branding, but co-facilitating with Virginia. There's a link to that. We are going to be launching many, many cohorts over the next year or so, and we'd love to have you a part of it. Spread the word. And with that, we'll just close with go get in some good trouble.